America is home to 33 million small businesses, the beating heart of communities across the country.
And proof that the American dream is still alive.
This is a show about those dreamers and doers and the communities they serve.
Their real life stories.
Their struggles and successes.
Their grit, determination, and passion.
And the people who fight
to keep their American dream alive.
I'm Alfredo Ortiz.
I'm Elaine Parker.
And it's time for another episode of Main Street Matters,
America's small business megaphone.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of Main Street Matters, America's small business megaphone. I'm Elaine Parker, the president of the Job Creators Network Foundation.
And I'm Jamie Bowers, one of the producers on this show.
And you can subscribe to the show at salempodcastnetwork.com or wherever you get your podcasts from. So what's happening lately, Jamie?
Well, we're going into election season here. And as you know, Elaine, I've done a lot of issue advertising in my career and a lot of, so I'm kind of a student of electoral advertising and issue advertising. And the thing is it's becoming apparent that the ads have started. You know, we're all going to have to start putting the mute button into play on our TVs. But one of the things here, I live in the DC area, as you know, and so we get a cornucopia of ads because people who are running in Maryland, people who are running in Virginia, people who are running in DC all have to buy the DMA for the Washington, D.C. area. And so there's a lot of wasted dollars when it comes to advertising. But my new nominee for a miss on political advertising is Congressman David Trone, who is a congressman from Maryland. You may know of him because David Trone's family, and I think David himself, started Total Wine. Which he got a big wine business.
Love that place.
Yes. Well, I am also a customer and appreciate his capitalism and his entrepreneurialism there. But his newest ad came out and has been playing heavily in the Washington, D.C. area. And it features, he was able to get an endorsement letter from Hakeem Jeffries, who's the Democratic House leader.
Future Democratic Speaker of the House, Hakeem Jeffries, has endorsed David Trone for the way he served the people of Maryland. So here's Marylanders reading the endorsement.
David Trone has been a consistent and valued partner
to fix our broken criminal justice system,
eliminate barriers for returning citizens,
and root out systemic racism.
And he's worked hard
to create new manufacturing and tech jobs
in the parts of Maryland too often left behind.
Sign, Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries.
I'm David Trone, and I approve this message.
And if you read between the lines as you watch the commercial, number one, Hakeem Jeffries only shows up in a photo in it, and he has regular constituents or actors, I'm not sure which, reading Hakeem Jeffries' letter. So to me, the undercurrent there is Hakeem Jeffries sent me a letter, probably written by one of his staff members, but he didn't care enough to actually show up in an ad for me. So number one, that's strike one. Strike two is he introduces Hakeem Jeffries as the future Democratic Speaker of the House, which is presumptuous at best. I mean, there's a lot of things that could happen between now and a time when the Democrats take over the House. So I thought that was kind of interesting that instead of describing him with his real title, the Democratic House leader, he said the future Speaker of the House. So as my mother used to say, there's many a slip between the cup and the lip. So I don't know that is an appropriate description. And I'm actually a little surprised that the lawyers at the stations running the commercial didn't put up a little bit of a fight on that description. And then the last thing is he's choosing Hakeem Jeffries. And Hakeem Jeffries is no Nancy Pelosi or Chuck Schumer.
Right.
And so I would be really curious to find out how many Maryland constituents that he has who actually know who Hakeem Jeffries is. So I think it's a 3 strikes and you're out. So that's my nomination so far on early political ads as kind of a loser. So he's had other ads that I thought were actually pretty strong. This one, big whiff. So, but sadly, I think we're all in store. We're going to have a lot of ads shown to us on every medium that we can imagine in the next few months. But this was an early one that I thought was kind of notable.
Yeah. That is kind of funny, actually. Kind of imaginative, though, how they brought a letter to life, but through the reading of other people. I think there's a little bit of a creativity. They get a point for that.
Fair enough. And of course he did it in the, DEI way that, he had every race, gender, everybody represented when they read this letter. So it was, I guess you're trying to make lemonade out of lemons there, I guess. I'm sure they had asked for an appearance or something on video, but I guess if that's all you've got, that's what you do. So You're right. It was, they do get a little bit of creativity points.
Yeah. I'm not looking forward to all the ads again. We had a recent state house seat had a special election. And it's amazing how the candidates will use like a picture at an event with the governor, with Governor DeSantis shaking hands and just to show like the proximity of standing next to the governor so that they can see that I'm with him.
Yep. And Elaine, as you and I know, we've been to a lot of political events. Just because you have a picture with somebody doesn't necessarily mean that you're best buddies.
Yeah. Or that he's with you. You never know. So, yeah. So do you think those ads work? I mean, because every time you get the eye roll from people, I mean, you and I are kind of immersed in, watching this horse race all the time. But do you think that average, everyday, ordinary Americans, that these ads work?
I think they do to some degree, especially when you're talking about candidates that people don't know a whole lot about. The old adage about advertising is that 50% of all advertising is wasted money. You just don't know which half, because the ads, you're never quite sure what really resonates with people and what may make the difference. And sometimes with these elections, it's name recognition. And so the ads, at the very least, bring somebody's name up. I will say it's kind of interesting. They say people claim they don't like negative ads, but oftentimes negative ads work. But I thought here in Virginia, Glenn Youngkin actually ran his governor's campaign was almost exclusively positive. And the other side tried to do negative ads against him, but they had a really hard time making any of them stick because he didn't have a track record. He was a business guy and he didn't have a lot of political ties. And so I think it was a good demonstration that you can be aspirational, you can be inspiring in your ads and be successful. I mean, clearly Reagan, they have to go way back, but Reagan did that a lot with his ads. He made people feel good about America and feel like everybody was had possibilities and opportunities. And I think I'd like to see more of that kind of advertising where somebody says, here are my ideas. Here's where I think we can all go, versus trying to sling mud. And one of the things I thought was kind of interesting in the last cycle in November of last year, one of the things I saw a lot in advertising was no longer did you say this politician did this bad thing. There was a lot of this politician is supported by these bad guys who supported this thing. It was like a two-part connection. And, the Democrats all said, MAGA supported so-and-so, which is clearly an undefinable term. What does MAGA supported mean? And so I saw a lot of kind of, it was guilt by association, but it was pretty weak sauce, I thought. But I imagine we're going to see a ton of that again in 24.
Yeah, the MAGA monster label will follow these candidates everywhere. Basically, if you're on that side running, I think you're going to be labeled the MAGA monster.
Yeah.
And today we're joined by John Carney. John is part of Breitbart News, where he leads the finance and economic section. Today we'll talk the disaster that is Bidenomics, Jerome Powell continuing to be wrong, and much, much more. John, welcome to Main Street Matters, America's small business megaphone.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be on.
And as I mentioned, Jamie is going to be sitting in today for Alfredo. We kind of call him our Ed McMahon, but he holds up his end of the show.
I'll try to fill in for Alfredo.
Well, John, tell us a little bit about you, how you made your way to Breitbart. And I understand that you have a newsletter, the Breitbart Business Digest newsletter. Tell us a little bit about that, too.
Sure. The Breitbart Business Digest is free. You just go to Breitbart on the upper right corner. There's a little thing you can click, and you will end up being able to subscribe. You get it in your inbox every day. And it is me trying not just to tell you what happened, but explain why it happened and what it means for the future. I think my friend Larry Kudlow says it has a cult following because I really do try to dig beyond just what you're going to read in the headlines or see on business news during the day and explain where we're going and what's going to happen.
John, I feel like that's so much more important today than ever because so often you see what you think might be a positive economic signal, or you hear a number that sounds good, and then when you dig into it a little bit, you find out that it's been massaged or changed or doesn't exactly tell you the full story. And so that kind of analysis beyond the statistic is super helpful.
It's allowed us to do some pretty great things over the past couple of years. One of the things we were able to detect was that inflation wasn't going to be transitory. This was a very small view at the time. Many people, the consensus was, no, inflation's going away. The Federal Reserve said it's going away. Joe Biden claimed to say it didn't even exist. We didn't have any inflation. And so we said, no, inflation's real. It's going to be persistent. We were right about that. The whole world moved to us. Last year, we kind of had a pretty controversial claim, which a lot of conservatives didn't agree with, but we were right on, which was that we weren't going to have a recession, that the economy was actually growing very strong. We began pointing out in January of 2023 that consumer spending was still really high. And it's very hard when you have very low unemployment and very high consumer spending to have a recession. That turned out to be right. And now we're looking at it, and the market is thinking that there's going to be 5, 6, 7 rate cuts in our current position, and that inflation is going to easily fall down to the Fed's 2% target. And our position is neither of those things are going to happen. We are going to see sustained inflation this year, and the Fed is not going to cut rates 5 or 6 times. I have 2 or 3 at the most, and a possibility, and again, this isn't my baseline, but a possibility that the Fed doesn't cut at all. And if inflation picks up enough, and this would be the shocker, that there is a non-zero chance that the Fed has to raise rates this year. They don't want to do that, but I think right now, nobody thinks it's possible. I'm here to tell you it's possible, and it could happen.
Wow.
Yeah, I bet that wasn't a super popular opinion last year about the recession on the conservative side. But one of the things that we've been talking about with that strong consumer spending is that it's partially driven because the reality is prices are inflated. And so we are spending more, but we're spending more because things cost more.
That's right. A lot of the when you get the retail sales numbers that come out every month, and I report on them every single month, I have to remind people that these are nominal numbers. They're not adjusted for price. So you have to check how much of this is just prices went up and how much of it is people are actually spending. The growth has been a little bit of both. There has been a huge surge because prices went up so much. And frankly, a lot of things you can't pull back on spending. You don't have a choice about whether to fill your car up with gasoline to get to work. You need to buy food for your family. You don't have a choice of that. You have to, if you have growing kids, you've got to buy them clothes at the beginning of the school year. Then you got to buy them again partway through it, again partway through it again. I'm a father, and so it seems like the kids are always growing out of their clothes. But so But one of the things that happened is that because people had a lot of excess savings from so much stimulus that we pumped into the economy, particularly the unnecessary stimulus that came in when Biden first took office, that he passed the American Rescue Plan, $1.9 trillion of extra money that came in, plus all of the things that were basically like rent abatements. You couldn't get foreclosed on. You couldn't get evicted. We suspended student loans. All of this just gave people so much more spending power that they actually did, even in real terms, increase their spending in a time where supply was constrained. This was an enormous policy mistake. It was totally avoidable, and yet that caused inflation. And frankly, it's not going away. The inflationary pressures are still there, and that's why I don't understand. Frankly, why people are so convinced it's going to come down. I don't see it happening, and so interest rates are going to stay high.
So,
in those interest rates, I saw a report yesterday about credit card level debt levels.
Yeah, I was just going to ask about that.
So high, and the fact that so many people, most credit cards are on a variable rate interest system, and so people are paying a lot more to carry that kind of debt.
Inflation was a double whammy in that sense, because you are spending more on your credit card because things cost more, and then interest rates have gone up to try to fight that inflation. So you're actually having to pay more on the money you borrowed through your credit card. And so we have now moved to a place where delinquencies, defaults, people unable to pay their credit cards has gone way up. And it's not just credit cards. I wish it were just credit cards. It's also auto loans. We shot the price of cars through the roof during this inflationary period. Used cars cost almost as much as new cars at one point. And so auto loan numbers went way up, and auto loan interest rates went way up. So again, that's this like 1-2 punch, right? Where you get hit with the high price and then you get hit with the high interest rate.
So are we just being propped up on, debt, essentially consumer debt, credit card debt, government debt with the spending? And to me, that sounds like we've built a house of cards. So when does it fall?
Well, this is a very good question. So it is partly propped up on debt, and government debt played a big role. The government's huge deficit spending doesn't make any sense right now. Even the most Keynesian economists will tell you that if you need to do deficit spending, that's when unemployment is high and you're trying to stimulate demand to drive people, back and drive demand for workers. Right now, we have 3.7% unemployment. This is, a historically low number. It's probably as close to zero as you can get. And so running, World War II sized deficits right now makes no sense at all. That's part of what's propping up the economy. Then the resultant very low unemployment rate also increases spending, because when people know that they feel secure in their jobs, layoffs are very low, they're willing to spend. So it's debt plus low unemployment fueling additional spending.
Yeah.
Well, so here's the thing that you see within the Biden administration is their economic reports keep coming out, and the headlines look good unless you're an economist or like you drilling way down into the report to look at some of the underlying currents happening. The Biden administration continues to be frustrated because they keep holding up their reports and saying, but you guys should feel better. You should. And every single poll across the board, whether it's NBC or Fox News, says people are not doing well. They don't feel good about things. They don't feel good about the economy overall. They don't feel good about their personal situation. And so nothing in those economic reports is translating to Americans' everyday lives.
That's right. I think what's happening is just very simple. Most people's definition of a bad economy is that they used to be able to afford something and now they can't. That might be because they lost their job and now they can't afford things, or it might be because inflation has gone really, berserk and now they can't afford things. So when you ask people, hey, unemployment's super low, why are you, upset about the economy? They're said, well, I used to have a fridge full of steaks, and now I can't do that because you drove the prices up. So a good economy is when you can afford the things you want and need in life, and a bad economy is when you can't.
Interesting. I want to switch gears on you for a second and talk about this border deal that went down. Down is an understatement. The people who actually negotiated on it on the Republican side didn't even vote for it. As a matter of fact, they were reporting yesterday that McConnell was actually the 41st vote to take it down, which is so interesting to me. Interesting is a kind word. But tell us about the border deal. Job Creators Network normally would not weigh in on legislation like this, but we did from an economic standpoint because our small business owners are being impacted from the economic standpoint, the crime that's coming across the border, and things like that are impacting our small businesses. We're seeing it obviously as some of these red state governors are busing migrants across the country. You're just kind of seeing it multiply on the crime. But tell us about the border deal. Who was going to win? Who was going to lose? Most of all.
So the border deal was being sold to Republicans, including those who were involved in the negotiation, as one that would actually take away some discretion from the president to basically have an open borders policy. The law says there are rules about who gets to come in. Those people who are not allowed in with a visa are supposed to be detained while we review their status. The president has decided that he's not going to do that people are just going, they call it a catch and release program, right? They're just going to let people go. This has encouraged massive waves of migration because the rest of the world realizes that they can walk over the border and there will be basically no controls. What Republicans wanted was controls. They said, look, this is chaos. Give us a border that is a border law that will not be subject to a president saying, no, never mind, it's okay, I'm just not going to enforce that stuff. What they got was a bill that actually makes it worse because it codifies what the Biden administration has been doing. It actually says, now this is totally allowed. We're going to explicitly put this up to presidential discretion. It does this, though, in a very, very tricky way. It creates something called mandatory border emergency authority. That sounds like, hey, something's got to happen. We're having a border emergency. It's a mandatory authority. But if you look at the mandatory authority, it says the president can do whatever he wants at his discretion, and it's unreviewable. So it's a mandatory optional authority. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't do what it was promised to do. This is, I think, frankly, why did Republicans support it? They got bamboozled. The Democrats outsmarted them on this. They crafted a bill that appeared to create a mandatory limit on migration. There's a 5,000 trigger that triggers nothing at all. And so people said, oh, we'll shut the border down if we get too many people in any one day. It doesn't do that. It actually just keeps it open forever if the president chooses to do so.
So why did Brandon Judd with the Border Patrol agents, why did they endorse it? They've been screaming for help. I heard some rumors about her pay raise in there and stuff like that, but that couldn't have done it.
No, those guys are good, honest people.
Right.
It's not about them trying to pad their own pockets. They want a country with a workable border. Every single person I've ever met who's in that job is great. So what I would say is they've actually been lied to. I saw an interview with him where he said, no, we're not going to release these people. We'll detain them. If you read the law, it says, no, we're going to release them. There is an option if you had the right president in that he could say, okay, I'm going to try to detain people. And there's a whole procedure that's basically built to prevent him from detaining them. But he could at least try to detain them. But there's nothing that says that will be the policy. And in fact, we know, because Biden has shown us what his policy will be, it will be to not detain people. And so I think what happened to Brandon Judd is somebody said to him, no, this will mean that we get to detain people. And that was just a lie. It's not true. And I feel bad that, in fact, that they've endorsed it because they were bamboozled.
It's interesting to me as an overarching issue. I think there can be certainly legitimate debates about levels of immigration, and you might say that people on the left want more immigration than people on the right. But I feel like, for the most part, if you talk to most voters, they would say it's fair for us to have an immigration policy, meaning that we do get to allow who we get to allow. It shouldn't just be a free-for-all open border. And even the rhetoric, people don't say, I want an open border. I have a hard time understanding why some of these politicians see it as an advantage, because I don't think your everyday Democrat sitting at home says, hey, this is a great policy just to let anybody in whenever we want. I mean, you can say, geez, I feel sympathy for the poverty. I feel sympathy for people who are in bad political conditions in Nicaragua or in El Salvador. But to say, hey, we should just let anybody in at any time, I think most reasonable people would say that's not a great policy. We should allow as many people as we can, but we should at least find out who they are, all of those things. So I have a hard time understanding why the politicians on the left seem to be for this kind of free-for-all.
Right. Well, I'll say two things. One, you're absolutely right. We live in a democracy. That means we get to set up the rules about our country how we want. We get to vote for politicians who vote on tax policy, defense policy, and guess what? Immigration policy is one of the policies that's up to us. Of course, the American people should get to decide this, and it shouldn't just be up to people in foreign countries deciding whether they want to come or not. No, we get to say whether or not the door will be open to you and how many people will come in and what the criteria will be. Yes, we should set that. I think the Democrats are actually kind of worried about the problem that their actual position, which is open borders, is deeply unpopular. And so that's one of the reasons Biden's saying, I need this law so I can control the borders. He does not need this law. He is currently not enforcing the provisions that would allow him to calm the surge down. Instead, he has chosen to go with open borders that is encouraging more migration. If he gets this provision, this bill, he would just continue to do the same thing. There's no reason to trust or believe that they would actually do this. And as I said, the bill doesn't require that at all. It leaves it completely up to presidential discretion. What we wanted was a bill that would take away presidential discretion, that instead of leaving it in the hands of the president would actually mean that you had to follow the law that Congress enacted. But it doesn't look like we're going to get it.
No.
So it failed. And the unfortunate part is the Democrats and the Biden administration can now put the entire crisis in the Republicans' laps and say, we had a deal and it failed. We tried.
Yeah, I think the answer to that is very simple. The deal was phony. It wouldn't have done anything to address the crisis. The crisis occurred because of your policies. There's no, yes, they will try to say, well, we had a deal. But again, there's not any plausible situation in which what was offered would solve the problem. It's a little like if you broke your leg and somebody said like, okay, I have a couple aspirin. You're like, can we do something about the leg? And they're like, actually, you know what? I'm going to decide later whether I'm going to give you the aspirin. That's literally what it said. Like there was no solution in this to the problem ever.
Interesting. So where do we go from here? What happens now?
I think that we go to the election. Like I said, this is a democracy. We get to decide as a people who, what our border policies should be, what our immigration policies should be, what our tax policies should be, what kind of business environment we want to create for the country. Right now, we don't have one that's very friendly to people starting businesses. We don't have one that's very friendly to people trying to be able to pay for the goods and services they need for their family. We can restore that. But again, it's democracy. They say democracy is on the line. That's not true. Democracy isn't on the line in the election. We will have a democracy regardless of who wins. But what is on the line are the policies that we can decide upon. And immigration is one of those, taxes is another, and frankly, whether or not we overspend and keep driving up inflation is the third.
Well, I keep seeing reports that it's going to be the Hispanic vote that decides this election. What is your thought on how Republicans make an appropriate argument that if they are abandoning the Democratic Party, if they come into the Republicans' tent, here's why these are good policies for you?
We won't spend you into poverty, which is what inflation did. That is the answer. Look, if you look at the polls, it shows that Hispanic Americans are very, very much upset about inflation. There's not like a big divide on this. And you say one of the reasons we got this is that Joe Biden came in and passed what they call the American Rescue Plan. It didn't rescue anything. The economy was already recovering, but they were desperate to spend money and they used the pandemic as an excuse. Then they passed the Inflation Reduction Act, which reduced inflation not at all and was again an excuse to spend money and actually kept inflation high, as by the way, everybody said it would. Everybody said, well, it'll keep inflation high, but maybe it'll reduce it 10 years from now. So even the proponents knew it was going to not make the problem better.
I think that was one of the most misnamed bills on the face of the earth in history. I mean, they're all BS in a lot of ways, but that one was extra special.
Yeah. Well, I mean, fortunately, we did not pass the Border Security Act because it may have been the next, in competition for a misleading legal law title. But so I think the pitch to every voter, frankly, white voters, black voters, Hispanic, Asian, Native Americans, everybody is the same, which is you're suffering under the policies, whether it's at the border or whether it's on the budget and whether it's inflation, that the Biden administration and the Democrats put in place. If you do not want to continue to suffer under those policies, you need to elect different leaders.
Well, I know we hear that from our small businesses all the time. And, when we talk to some of these folks, which, I always say they're on the front lines because they're Main Street small business owners. One of their big issues is, of course, the credit crunch, and their, access to capital has been virtually cut off. And if they can get credit, they're paying double digits sometimes. And, as far as, our jobs report that just recently came out, you're talking 353,000 jobs exceeded expectation. Doesn't matter if you look down in the report and you see where they actually are coming from. But the number is high. I mean, and, the Fed is, you don't think he's going to cut rates as much as everybody's hoping. Are we going to have just a complete pause and the jobs market's going to continue, producing what it is? Because when we looked, there are about 40% of the jobs that were what we called, they were either government, like quasi-government healthcare type jobs, or social services.
Government adjacent jobs,
yeah.
Right. And there have been a lot of those. Interestingly enough, the January report didn't have as many of those as before. I don't know if that'll keep up. There are a lot of quasi-government jobs. That's government competing with the private sector for workers. That's not great. But especially when you have very low unemployment already, you shouldn't be having this many people hired into the government. That's a problem. But as you said, like the high inflation caused high interest rates. The Fed reacted to high inflation by raising interest rates. That makes it very hard for small businesses to finance expansion, to finance, just frankly, staying alive. To replace anything, you need to finance a piece of machinery. To open up a new plant, you need financing. If you have vehicles involved, you're paying more for the vehicles, and you're paying more for for the interest on those vehicles. The other thing is that a lot of small businesses have a lot less pricing power than big businesses. They can force through the cost increases onto their customers, where a lot of small businesses, frankly, have a lot more trouble doing that. And so they end up actually eating it on their profits a lot. We saw big business profits go up by a lot. a lot of small businessmen have told me in my community that they feel like they got crushed on their costs of merchandise, and they're not able to pass through the costs as much because, they're one store or they're one, service provider among many. So it's very competitive. Whereas the big guys, the Walmart, they can pass on the costs a lot easier than the small guys.
So, Jerome Powell, I always joke that the one job that you can be wrong at all the time is weatherman. It seems like Jerome Powell really missed the boat on this transitory inflation. Does that mean he needs to go? Because it seems like that is a big, big miss and causing a lot of pain that he didn't move quicker.
Yeah, it was a huge miss. Frankly, it wasn't just Jerome Powell. The Federal Reserve employs thousands of economists, and they were all wrong. As far as I can tell, not one of them was a dissenter in this whole thing to say, you know what, maybe we've got inflation wrong. They just, there was a kind of group think going on there. I think Jerome Powell's done for. He's not going to get renominated no matter who gets elected president. Donald Trump has said, I won't renominate him. The left hates him because they want him to have already started cutting interest rates because they think high interest rates, they're correct, are bad for the reelection of Joe Biden. So they don't want to have him come in a second time. So Powell knows he's done. Whether, should he, not get nominated because of the mistake over transitory inflation? Frankly, I look back through history and I'm not sure any of the people who have ever run the Fed would have gotten this right. And so it's hard for me to hate him too much over that mistake. I mean, they could have read the Breitbart Business Digest.
Do you have any Fed email addresses signed up? I mean, can you look?
I've got a couple of them. I'm not going to say who they are because they'll probably lose their job if they get caught reading the Breitbart Business Digest.
That is a great plug. That's one of the best plugs I've ever heard. And where can people go again to sign up for your newsletter?
Yeah, go to Breitbart.com and click on the upper right corner, hit newsletters, subscribe. It's free. You get it every single day, 5 days a week. I take Saturday and Sunday off. You've got to play with my kids and go to church. But then I'm back on it every Monday, and you'll get it in your inbox. It comes out right around the time the markets close, 4:30.
Perfect. Let's move to one more topic before we go. The election in November. This is been a very different election, a very different primary season. We've got third parties involved. We've got RFK Jr. We've got, I think the Supreme Court is hearing arguments today on the Colorado ballot issue, which obviously, depending on how they rule, will impact many, many other states. I mean, what is your crystal ball telling you?
My crystal ball tells me that the economy is going to be about where it is today when election day happens. That employment will be growing a little more slowly, so that's not going to help Biden. Inflation will be around right where it is right now. That will continue to hurt Biden. So I think on the economic issue, and the border is just going to get much, much worse. So I think the things that are hurting Biden now will continue to hurt him. I think it's a great challenge for Republicans to overcome some of the structural things that Democrats have put in place in elections to help them get elected. The idea that you can, send in 1,000 mail-in ballots from an address and, basically stuff the ballot box is a problem that Republicans have to face. And so what do we do about that? You just have to convince more people to vote for you. I mean, and frankly, I think that'll be easier this time than it was in 2020 because we had a pandemic and people were basically voting against the pandemic. They said, I don't like what's happening. I vote for change. I think we have another situation like that where people are going to say, yeah, I still don't like what's happening. I'm voting for change again.
Yeah.
Do you think Joe Biden will be the Democratic nominee?
I do think he'll be the Democratic nominee because I don't think they can unite around somebody else. There's too many special interests to, like if they pick one person, think of all the other groups they will alienate. It's hard to get somebody who checks off all the boxes you need to be the next Democratic nominee. I think that's actually a big problem for the Democratic Party going forward. They have a lot of capable politicians, but do they check the right boxes on the on the Democrat DEI, litany? And if they don't, it's very hard to get them in office. And I think that'll be a problem they face.
Agreed.
Do you think Donald Trump will be the Republican nominee?
Oh, absolutely. Look, the Republicans, even the people who say, I would have liked a new guy. Now it's very clear Donald Trump is the nominee. Republicans are uniting around him. And I think a lot of people who really hope that Donald Trump, who, the things he wasn't able to accomplish in his first term, perhaps, frankly, a little bit naive about the way Washington worked. He thought he could come in and get things done, and Washington came at him with everything they had. He's not going to get caught by surprise this time. He knows that they're going to be out to destroy his presidency from not even the day he takes office, but from the moment he wins the election. And so I think a lot of Republicans have a renewed hope that we'll get a lot done in the second Donald Trump term, and that's going to drive people to vote.
All right. And that newsletter, again, go to Breitbart.com in the upper corner. You hit
upper right corner. Yeah, right there. And click on newsletters, subscribe to the Breitbart Business Digest, get it in your inbox, and find out, I'll just give a teaser. If you're wondering John says the Fed's not going to cut in March. He says they're not going to cut 5 times. If you want to know how many times the Fed will cut and when it's going to happen, I'll tell you in the Breitbart Business Digest.
Thanks so much for joining us on Main Street Matters, America's small business megaphone. Main Street Matters is part of the Salem Podcast Network. New episodes debut every Wednesday and Friday. You can subscribe to the show at salempodcastnetwork.com or wherever you get your podcasts from, and we will see you next time.